Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, mastering the art of fire service leadership.
Where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Kerry Henderson. Thanks for joining.
Welcome back to another great episode of the Heat of Command podcast. You know, every week, Kerry and I sit down and we try to figure out what we should talk about. And, you know, we've opened up a lot about how we go about this and how much prep or how little we put into it sometimes, you know, and I think the goal for us is to really come off authentic and just kind of shoot from the hip on what's on our heart, you know, and I think sometimes having those valuable conversations is really important. So today, you know, Kerry and I talk about a lot about leadership and who we are and introspection, you know, and we talk about values and how those matter. Well, to take it a step further, we're really going to dig deeper into that how. How do we become that? How do we really understand our truest, most authentic self, our truest identity, and understand our most valuable assets as a person without any of those titles and accolades that we have, that we usually identify ourselves with? And, you know, everybody out there has heard me talk a lot about therapy, and we're going to talk a lot about that today, and maybe some other avenues for you as an individual to start taking a journey down. Like, where do I start? Okay, so we talk about all these values, we talk about all this stuff, and where do I start? So to continue the hard conversations and to kind of push the boundaries on leadership and growth, here we go. We're going to talk about therapy and why it's beneficial to us in the industry and why we think most people in our industry, if not all, need it and the benefits of it. And, you know, breaking the stigmas of really what therapy is and what it isn't. So I'm pretty excited about this episode.
Me too. I've always been a big proponent of therapy, and it's interesting, my journey through therapy. I've been to therapy a bunch of different times. You know, it's generally I've been to the, you know, talk therapy, I guess you call it, you know, with a licensed clinical social worker or, you know, a therapist of some sort. And for different reasons, I've gone for anxiety or stuff going on, you know, in my personal life, divorce, taking my kiddo to therapy during divorce and all the things. And it's like, I'll go to therapy for a while. And for me, it's like, I would go and I think I would get to this place where it's like, I'm not sure what else to talk about because, and I think you heard me talk in one episode about a born people pleaser. And I would actually go and tell my therapist what I thought she wanted to hear. It was not productive at all. And I was like, okay, I think I won therapy. I told her exactly what she wanted to hear. And she thinks I'm all peachy keen. And she clears, you know, she says, I don't think you need to come anymore. There's nothing else to talk about. And I leave and I go, I won. I won therapy. Yeah.
This was easy.
Yeah. And it's, you know, and I would feel, you know, somewhat better, but I would never scratch really below the surface of what I really needed to be doing. And they would give me suggestions. Like I was having and still have this issue with being in the car, all the car accidents and all the other stuff. And being in some car accidents, it makes me anxious in the car. So that's one reason. I think that was kind of my excuse to start therapy again, was like I had this like solid thing that I could say I'm having trouble with, that I knew it was like a lot of other stuff. It's like, okay, I'm nervous in the car and that's making trips miserable for me and my husband. So I could pinpoint that and you know, it made it easy for me to reach out to therapy. And I think for a lot of people, that's the thing. It's starting, right? It's making the call, making the appointment, or finding someone that you feel comfortable. But it's like, hey, if you need to make up something like that's concrete, you know, you don't have to call on the phone and say, hey, my life is falling apart, I need a therapist. But like pick one thing like that's simple enough. And then once you get there, really, then you can open the floodgates. But for me, it was this riding in the car thing. And so, you know, a couple times I had gone to like online therapy and stuff. And she would give me these things that homework I was supposed to be doing. And I would come back the next week and she'd be like, did you do the things? I'm like, mm-hmm. And I'd done like one half, you know, not even all the way. I wasn't doing the work. I was like, come on, Kerry, you tell everybody to go to therapy in the department, and you tell everybody that the first therapist isn't always the one, and you may have to therapist shop till you find somebody you click with or a style. I was not practicing anything I was preaching.
Yeah, sometimes it could come off as hypocritical, and I've been down that road too, right? And I think there's going to therapy and then there's doing therapy. And I think
Yeah.
there's a big difference in that. And, as we, push this mental health stuff within our industry, sometimes it's like, I know some departments like send their people to therapists on an annual basis and they make it mandatory. And it's like, okay, like,
Yeah.
cool, you're checking a box, but like,
Yeah.
are you going to therapy? Are you doing it? And I think the goal is for people to actually want to do it. But I think there's a lot of fear behind that, right? Like, to actually go and explore your past, whether it's on the job stuff, whether it's childhood stuff, whether it's this identity, like who am I type stuff, like that's hard, and it is about finding the right person. And,
Mhm.
I think especially for us in our industry, and you look at, military, firefighters, police, nursing, doctors, ER physicians, to stuff like that, you look at the professions that we do and, it is finding therapists where you don't need to take, your first 4 sessions, 6 sessions explaining your life, right? Because a lot of people don't understand the life that we live, that you're on shift for 24 hours, you go home for 48, you could get forced back, the things we see, they don't get it. So then you're sitting there for the next 4 sessions explaining what your life is like, and their jaw is on the ground and they have no idea how to deal with you. Right? Because they're intimidated by the mere fact of the life that you live. So it is about their, shopping or finding people who specialize in first responder, military, people who get us. So you're not explaining your life and how it is those first 4 sessions, and you can start getting into that, why are you here?
Yeah. And for me, it was twofold what happened for me to finally find someone and a method that really clicked with me. And the first thing was finding EMDR.
Yeah.
And we had a woman come and talk to us. It was it's one of those things that, God sends it to you when you're ready for it or
Right.
whatever. But a friend of mine in the department had gone to a Ducks Unlimited banquet, which is a fundraiser for duck hunters, if you're not familiar with what it is. And it was a big fundraiser, and he sat at a table with a couple, and she was a big, amazing therapist for military and was starting working with first responders as well. They had just moved here to Virginia and opened a big ranch, equine assisted EMDR therapy. And it's a nonprofit 501c3. And she said, hey, oh, you're a firefighter. This is what we do. Well, he knew me, and I had started our peer team here in our department. So long story short, he connected me with her, and she came and talked to our peer team. And it was like you always tell the story about, she's talking to just you in the room, you feel like you're the only one in the room.
Yep.
And that happens to me at church sometimes. I feel like the pastor's talking just to me. But anyways, so when Michelle came, and it was the first time someone had explained like anxiety and how it really rewires your brain. Because to me, it always was like, okay, it's feelings, it's just feelings. But like this was the chemical processes and like the scientific biology of what your brain does and your amygdala does, and how it's trapping these memories and you can't really process them appropriately. And so I think last episode you were talking about like that hope versus hopelessness idea that, you know, when you can label something as hopeless, it's like having an answer, right? Well, it's just hopeless. Well, a lot of people with like anxiety and depression and PTSD, you don't want to get help because you think, oh, I'm just going to always feel this way. There's no amount of therapy, there's no amount of work that's actually going to change this. I'm just going to feel like this forever. But when she explained, it was like I needed like the scientific biological excuse of why my brain was doing what it was doing. I was like, okay, see, it's not just me, it's my brain. It's I can't help it. And which is true. And so finding Michelle and finding EMDR and like getting past that like hopelessness, like I wasn't like in a hopeless place. I just didn't feel like I was like, I don't want to do all this work and then not help. So I'm just not going to. But once I learned about EMDR and how it helps you process those memories and those experiences and put them like in the right places, man, I was like, okay, I'm willing to do the work now. And so when I go see, she's at a place called Tailwinds Ranch that they run, and it is equine assisted, which is with horses sometimes. Sometimes we're not with horses, sometimes we are, but we do the bilateral brain stimulation and stuff. Man, it is so cool. And and she told me those first few sessions that she would call me on my BS. She wouldn't let me BS her. She wouldn't let me make stuff up to just be done. And I had to come willing to work for at least an hour, sometimes longer, hard work. And so it's made a huge difference.
Yeah, I think, especially people in our profession and just the personalities that me and are commonplace in our industry. It takes I think, a special type of therapist to enter our industry and try to work through the type of people we are, right? And the patience and the resilience they have to work with people like us is pretty remarkable. And I remember going in and, you go in there and you're like, well, why are you at therapy? I'm like, well, I want to be a good dad and a good husband. And like the BS flag gets thrown right away. And you're like, what? Like, who are you? And it's just so different because it's so much more than just what you want to be and want to become. And there's so much underneath the surface of who we are, our identity. And, the job of that therapist is to help you process a lot of that stuff, the things that we have seen through our careers, the things that have happened to us as children or later in life. Like, how do we properly process that? Because in our industry, we have an innate ability, which is an awesome ability, right? It's the needed ability for our industry to go into extremely traumatic experiences, block it completely out, go do a job and be great and successful at that job. And then we go back to the station and we start cracking jokes 5 minutes later. Yet for some people, that is like the most horrific thing they will ever experience in their life. For us, it's another day. Like, we have this ability to just shut it down, go to work, and then move on. Like, that's pretty cool. And that's what we need to enable to do our jobs. However, the biggest question I ask is like, how did we get there? Like, how are we able to do that where most of society cannot do that? So it like makes you think, like, what happened to us for us to develop that kind of skill or to develop that type of coping or develop that ability to kind of block things out, do a job and move on? Because behind all of that is a story. Something is there, and it's like, what is that? And I think it's important for people to figure that out because I think it turns into this, we live under this false identity, and we just become, and I've said it most of our presentation, we become this product of the environments we were born and raised in, or the things we have experienced in life, or a combination of both. And it's like, is that who you really are? And for most people, sometimes where I say that, it's like, no, that's like a deep question. Like, you need to dig deep on what I'm really saying here. It's like, dig down and look back. Are you really who you want to be, or are you just shaped by experience and life? Because I don't want you to be shaped by experience in life. I want you to know who you really are. And I think we need that individuality in our industries. And a lot of times having these conversations, like, I can't go have this conversation with most people I work with, right? They're not going to listen, or they're not going to understand, or I'm misunderstood. And that's like, okay, like, I get it, but this is some deep stuff. And that's where I think therapists come in, right? This is their specialty. They can start understanding how to peel back that onion where I don't. I'm just like, dude, bro, like, this is all you got to do, man. Like, figure out who you are and that's it. And it's like, there's so much more behind there. And so it's like, that's the next step, is going to the professionals who trained to start peeling back that onion. Like, I can tell you, like, it was the best thing that happened to me. I can tell you, like, how I started and the importance of it, but they are the true professionals who are really going to start peeling back, like, who you really are. Who is Kerry? Who is Kyle? And living in that authentic self. And I think that's so important for our lives. I believe we all have a God-given purpose, right? And if we're not living in that purpose, like, what are we doing? And it's like crazy. I want people to go find their purpose. And your purpose and your identity is not tied to any title or accolade that you have. It's so much deeper than that. And that's where values come in. And it's like living in those and bringing those to the table within our industry. But it takes a professional to kind of get you there. And that's why I think therapy is just so important. It's not saying there's anything wrong with any of us. It's just a person who can have these deep conversations with and help you sift through a lot of the things that have happened to us.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, especially now with the work I'm doing with the EMDR stuff, because for me, like, it's not always, a lot of times it's working through trauma, it's working through hard stuff. But what she's really helped me do now is put together like connections, how so much of like things that I've experienced or behaviors or the way I respond is connected to something else that either I've completely forgotten about or I didn't realize. So the EMDR is so cool because like if I'm just sitting there doing talk therapy, sometimes I'm not making the connection or I'm not, people ask a question and it's like I'm giving you kind of what I think it might be, but like with the EMDR, it brings up so many things you haven't thought about in so long, or like all these thoughts and memories as they kind of go by. If you don't know about EMDR, the way we do it is she puts, we talk when I first come in about what I've got going on or whatever, and she'll kind of hone in. Like she's really good about honing in on something. Like even if I come in and say, I think this is what's bothering me, she'll make me kind of talk through it. And sometimes it's actually something else. But anyways, we'll pick something, and then she puts these tappers in my hand, and they're these buzzers, one in each hand, and they buzz back and forth, buzz, 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 buzz. And then you close your eyes and you think about the thing she prompts you. And you're supposed to, like, it's like riding a train or a bus. And as thoughts go by, like they go by really fast, and you start to think about different things and how they kind of correlate and relate. And then she'll eventually stop it, and you open your eyes and she'll say, "What did you see?" And like all of this stuff starts to get connected to each other. And like you work through it and work through it and work through it. And a lot of times in the beginning, it's bad stuff or stressful stuff or whatever. And as you start to process those things, it helps, the talking part and the bilateral brain stimulation, you actually process some of those things. And eventually, as you keep going and going through the session, those thoughts turn better. They turn to a good place, and your thoughts are more rational about them, or not as intrusive about them, or as anxious about them. Or if it's, depression stuff, it's not as, whatever it is you're working through. It's the coolest thing, like how so many things in our lives are connected. And when you do that hard work, it makes you so much, more aware of yourself and what you've been through and how it shaped you. Like you were saying, it all just shapes you so much, and your decisions and your relationships and your interactions and all the things. And it's just so cool how it's all intertwined. And you may think, you're struggling with this thing, like this one thing or whatever, it's really bothering me. And turns out it's like so much deeper. It's this a whole other layer is really the underlying thing. But all you can come up with is like a couple weeks ago, I was having a really hard time because my son was going to his dad's for all of spring break. So it's like 10 days or whatever. And I was like dreading it. And I was weepy and I was anxious and irritable and all the things. And that's what I was assuming that was really about. And it was a lot about that. But come to find out, I go to my session, and it's like all these other things that were like the anniversary of my dad's death is coming up. And I had never processed that because when he died and I went to his house, I was trying to take care of my sister, and I went into firefighter paramedic mode. I went into, all right, we have to call, the police, and then the ME will call, and, we'll call the funeral home, and this is what we're going to do. And this is how and I just went right into that first responder mode, and never like to daughter losing her dad mode. So it's just so crazy how all the things kind of come together.
Yeah, it's all connected, right? And I think that there's a lot of times as we talk about this and like become more open about therapy, I think what starts to set in then is a fear, right? A fear of what are we going to uncover, or where is this going to go?
Scared of that.
Yeah. And like, I get that, like totally, but it's worth the journey. Like that's what I can tell people. Like it is so worth it. The hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And like to this day, it's like I'm still learning to live in those shoes as this person of who I've always wanted to be. Like, you're skewed at life over the past, since you were born, And then you take this journey and it's like, how do I live in these shoes? Like, I'm so used to the way I used to cope with things and deal with things. And like, I don't like any part of that anymore. And I understand why I do it. Now what? I remember at the end of therapy, my therapist was like towards the end, like, you don't have to do this. Like, she kept telling me, you don't have to do this. And I'm like, no, I want to. But, and she would always reiterate, like, you don't have to, because like, and at that time I was so naive on like what she really meant by that. But now I'm like, well, I get it. Like, totally get it. Like, yeah, it's hard, and it's to become this person that I think I was always meant to be, to try and grow in that, especially in our industry. It's very challenging to do and be, but it's so worth it. So worth it.
It is.
And that's where my encouragement lies. It's like, I understand the fear. I get it. I don't know where therapy would go for you and our listeners out there on an individual level, but my encouragement is, it is totally worth it. 100% best, smartest decision I've ever made in my life. And it has made me a better father and husband, which, when I first went to therapy, I'm like, that's what I want to be, but that was just kind of a result that just happened as we fixed the other stuff that was really bothering me, and how the anger and all these things of how I lived. And as a result of taking that journey, like, things just happen automatically, and it's kind of cool how all that happens. And you just get to live in this essence of who you always wanted to be. And you're not dictated by some title or some job title or accolade or position. I get to be Kyle. And again, as you go through those changes, sometimes I think it transitions over into really finding your group of people. I don't think, from my experience, I don't think the fire service is really supportive of people going through change like this. And I think that's the hard part when we look at mental health within our industry, is we want a checklist. Did we do this? Check, 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 check. And then that's it. And then we're done. And then if for people who really want to change, it's like, we don't know how to support them. We don't know how to be there for them. So instead, we're just going to not go there. We're not going to have these discussions, and we're not going to talk about this stuff because it touches on the feels a little bit, and it can affect people very differently. So, I think it transitions to building your people. And I always talk about building your people, and we do. Like, who is in your group that you can depend on, that you can have real conversations with, where nobody's going to get defensive, where people genuinely, like, really care about you and want to see you succeed in whatever you choose to do. Like, they're not going to judge you on anything, even if it's the furthest thing away from this job and this industry. That's cool. Like, cool. I'm happy for people who figure out who they really are and supporting them in that journey. So, it's very challenging to do and to take that journey, but it is so needed in our industry and so worth it. I just wish everybody would go, and not just go to therapy, but to actually put the time and effort to go do it,
Yeah. And it's hard, you're talking about building your circle of people. And I feel like outside of work, I've got some people, like, I can be, really open with this whole therapy journey and just a lot of other things in my past, in my personal life. But at work, and I'm curious how other people, like at battalion chief or assistant chief or fire chief level, how do you do that? You can't do that. It's so hard at work, because I'm at this level now where I don't, what's the level of vulnerability that's appropriate, and which I think usually very comfortable with being vulnerable, but there is a line, right? A professional line at work. And how do you build that at work when you get to higher positions and higher levels? And we've talked about this before, but even to me, like, as a woman, sometimes that even makes me a little nervous. Like, okay, I'm spilling my guts, to coworkers, even if they're equivalent level. And it's like, does that come across as a weakness? Which I don't, I think my coworkers are pretty good about that stuff, but it's like, it's hard now at my level to have that group.
Yeah.
Group of
And
nuts.
I always think, too, when we look at building our group of people, it's like, get people outside of our industry.
Yeah.
To really have that outlook from somebody else is, I think, so valuable. And we talk about too a lot, we talk about this term, the brotherhood and sisterhood of the fire service, which I think there's niches where that is thriving very well, but I think as a whole, our industry, we say these terms, but we really don't know what they mean. It's almost like we have a hierarchy of what is bad enough to where we're going to support you. But when it comes to the mundane day-to-day stuff, I think we're terrible, right? I don't think as a whole that that is like acceptable of dealing with the day-to-day stuff. It's, kind of still that old school mentality, put some sand on it, move on. Like, cool, we all got issues. Like, all right, whatever, we don't need to hear about that. So, that's very interesting to me to see. And I really don't understand that. It's sometimes it's like that, just that coping, like how do I control a situation I don't have control over? And like on the mundane stuff, we just don't need to have that. So it's just not accepted. And then it's looked at as soft and weak and needing a safe space. And a lot of times when I hear those terms thrown around now, I'm like, you're just deflecting, right? Like you're deflecting from the reality of what happened to you.
Yeah.
Right?
And you've said before, it goes back to a lot of times it's, well, I had to go through it. So do you, or I had to figure out myself. So do you, or this is what you signed up for.
Right.
So suck it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it also makes me think of the brotherhood sisterhood thing is sometimes it's just certain brothers and certain sisters that
Right.
we're willing to go above and beyond for, or willing to help out. If you're like part of this group or part of this clique, or you're this person or that person, or you've done this much or this, this little, it makes a difference. It's like, we'll do all these, crazy things for some people, but we don't do it for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely not equal across the board. I would totally agree with that. I was just having a conversation with someone on that. Was that today? Or that was the other day, I think, at work. And yeah, it's very interesting. Like I said, it's almost like we put a hierarchy on, on some of this stuff, or on some people, on who's going to get the most of us. And if you act this way, no. And it's just, it's everything that it shouldn't be. And there's a reason for that. And, it's like I said, it's the more people that want to take a journey into themselves, I think, is where we can start improving some of this stuff. But it's a big ask. Like, I totally get it. I've had many conversations with people like, I'm good. I'm fine. I had a good childhood. My parents were there. And it's like, dude, it's so much more than that. Like, it's just like, I get it, but I don't know how you feel. And I've said this too, after therapy, I almost felt like I had a superpower. Like, I can look at people and be like, ooh, you got some stuff that happened in your childhood. Like, I get why you're like that. You're a jerk, but you're like that because something happened to you. And it's like, why don't you go take that journey to figure out why? Why do you react like that? Why do you have that anger? Why do you have that narcissism? Why do you have those viewpoints on life and the world and all that stuff? Like, why? Examine that, because a lot of times we're just coping. We're trying to deflect from our feelings, right? We're deflecting from, having to open up and be vulnerable. And it's easier to be angry. It's easier to believe stuff that's not real. It's easy to point a finger at other people and blame people to take the pressure off of you and the attention away from you. And these are all the things therapy combats, And I think it's so important. It would be interesting to me if, like, you take an entire organization, doesn't need to be the fire service, whatever, but you take one whole place where everybody works and like they all agree to go do therapy, not just go to therapy, but actually do it. And like you do like a study from like start, and obviously it's going to be a multi-year process, right? And like you do a study and study a group of people that actually go through this. And then like, what's the outcome? That'd be crazy. Like, what would happen? I think you get some people leave the industry, absolutely, because that's just not who they are. Cool, totally supportive, but yeah, like what would that look like? And I don't know. It's very interesting. I think the biggest things that come out of going through therapy, and the biggest thing I learned, was empathy and compassion. We talk about that all the time, and it's not just empathy and compassion for others; it's for you. Because you can't, and then this is how like all this stuff connects, right? It's full circle: leadership, your personal story, your personal journey. Because in order to have empathy and compassion for others, you need to have it for yourself. Because if you don't even know how to have it for yourself, you can't have it for anybody. And I think those are the most important traits of any leader. So if you can't have it for yourself, you need to start
a journey, in my opinion, of therapy or figuring out kind of what happened to you and start getting rid of some of those coping mechanisms to really understand what empathy and compassion is. And if you don't have empathy, if you're listening to us and you don't have empathy and compassion for yourself or others, like, here's your sign. We're waving it right in front of you. Go get it, because it's, like I said, it's totally worth it.
And another soapbox for me along those lines, if you're the type of person, because this was me, where I didn't think I was bad enough to need therapy. I hadn't been through enough. So I'm going to this woman who treats, like the guys in the military that are like, the superheroes of the military. And I'm thinking, I haven't been there. I haven't been through enough. I'm not bad enough. I'm not, I'm a completely functioning wife and mom and battalion chief. So I don't deserve her. Right. And so she had to like break me down for that one. It's like, if you're listening and you think you're not bad enough, you haven't been through enough, you haven't seen enough, you're not whatever enough, you are. Everyone deserves to therapy or personal development or whatever it is. You do, it'll make a difference. It 100% will.
Yeah, Chris, that's an amazing point. It's so easy to compare us.
Yep.
Oh, they have it so much worse. I hear that all the time. Okay, cool. And like, all our traumas or things that happen to us are very personal to us. And the last thing we need to be doing is comparing, right?
Right.
No, like, get that out of there. I don't care how silly it seems, because the brain doesn't. And again, I'm no doctor. I'm not a professional. Some of the things I learned, the brain doesn't understand the difference between being chased by a lion or having, right, like, getting in the car and having that anxiety. Like, the nervous system is reacting the exact same.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The goal is to not get the nervous system to react that way in times of riding in a car. But when we have a lion chasing us, absolutely we want it to, right? So it's like, how do we rework this nervous system, and why did it get so amped up? So it's really diving deep into that stuff. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm just like, this is like kind of what I learned and some of my takeaways. So that's why we can't compare, because the reactions in the nervous system are the same regardless of what the circumstances. The circumstances are nothing. It's it's what is going on inside our bodies, and then how do we fix that? And that's the most important part.
So well said. So well said. I love this episode.
Oh yeah. We could keep going, and we look at like older generations within our industry. I think it's important to hit on, and a lot of people say we've lost the brother sisterhood and all this stuff. But like, I look back, like, I grew up in the fire service. I was a kid, I saw it,
Me too.
and sure, there was close. It's on the surface, it appeared to be closer. Now, back then, when growing up, there was residency requirements, right? So most people in the state of Illinois, a lot of places, you had to live in the town you worked in. And now that's not really widely accepted. So a lot of people kind of blame that on it. But I look back as a kid, and it's like, is this really a brother sisterhood where, like, we're just getting hammered all the time and dealing with things at the bar and bringing our kids to the bar and, all this stuff? Like, and I'm just like, that's not a brother sisterhood I want to be in. Like, and is that our definition of brother sisterhood? Like, that's what we're going to do? Go drink our problems away, or go, prioritize the career over everything. So yeah, it might have this false sense that there was more of a brother sisterhood years ago, but I think it was just a false facade of many people hurting that didn't really, that coped a different way than I think we're seeing today. I think there's been some changes over, and instead of, substance abuse, we're seeing more anxiety issues or whatever the case may be. It's evolved a little bit. So yeah. I think it's easy to throw around some of those terms, but I think these issues are so deep rooted in our industry, and it's hard to, tell some people like, hey, like, this is what it is. And I think even on an organization level, it's like, how do you not cross that line of, you don't want to forcing people to go to a therapist, I think is, that's checking a box, right? Yeah, we do. We have a mental health program. We send our people once a year to a therapist. I'm like, that's not a mental health program. Like, that's a checking a box. Like, yeah, we're doing our part. So it's very challenging to have a mental health program, and I think we've talked about it before, and I'm not going to get into that. But how do we encourage our people to like, hey, go do therapy? Like it's worth it. You need to go. We all do. And who's going to be the leader in that? But again, a lot of times you get that comparison, or I didn't have it that bad, or I'm good. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, you're not, and you can see that industry wide. And it's just like I said, it's so worth it. And the journey and the personal growth, you see a lot of people just get stuck, right? Get stuck in this identity of this job, and that's it. Like that is their entire life. That's it. And
Mhm.
it's sad. It's sad to see because there's so much more. There's so
There
much more.
is.
And
There
and
is.
and everybody out there is you have so much more to bring, and your identity is so important to this job, and it's not the job. And we all have this innate ability to lead, this innate ability to have a set of purpose and values that we want. And I think it's very individual. And I think that's how you build strong teams. When we can get to that and, bring everybody's individual ability to the table instead of everybody trying to fit in the same box. We bring our own separate boxes to the industry, and that's how you create great teams and build. So,
Yeah, and I think there's this misconception that if I don't live and breathe this, then I'm not a brother or sister of the fire service, that I'm not, all in, or, that if I've got this other life, or it's not my whole life, then I'm not, that I don't have the passion for the job that I should. But you can have both. I love this job. I love this career. I love what it's about, and I love doing the job, but I also love all the other things that Kerry has in her life, right? And that's what makes me better at work.
yeah, it's totally and it's boundaries too, right? Like how do we divide our personal and professional lives? And we talk a lot about this, and
Yeah.
I never want to say that it's like, I don't want you to be proud of the job you do, or be excited about it, or have that passion for it. Like that's cool, but it shouldn't be controlling you. Your control should be coming from something that is deep inside, your deepest values and passions. Like cool, and when we have that much when something such as a title and a position and a job has that much control over you, like there's some trouble there, right?
Yeah.
There's something there that I would encourage to examine and take that journey.
Yeah, because if it's controlling you, or, what how are you showing up for the people in your life that need you, if that's the case?
Yeah, and there's so much more to life than a job, and
Yeah.
that's not just our industry, that's everywhere. There's so much more to life than a job. And, one thing we were talking at church this morning was, we just lost this sense of community, just in general in society. Like everybody's so busy, and like what happened to the days where you just knock on a neighbor's door or walk over and everybody's just hanging out, like where that was a commonplace, like that happened every day. And now it's like you got to schedule it 2 weeks in advance because everybody's early, and all you're doing is trying to schedule a time to hang out with your neighbors. And it's crazy, and it's like, so how do we just back up and bring back the sense of community? But it takes an effort on everybody's part,
Yeah.
not just one person. And it takes the desire and want. And, it's a lot of times, a lot of people want things, but they don't want to put the work into it.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I think this is, if you want to be an effective leader, like this is your sign. Like you have to go look in that mirror and examine yourself, your truest identity. And I'm sorry to tell you, that is a hard journey to do on your own. It's a hard journey to do even when you have a close circle of people you could depend on and have open conversations with. And there are professionals that are ready and sitting that want to have these conversations and help you achieve that, because that is a big step in life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Such good stuff, Kyle.
It really is. This was fun. I think needed, right? I think we talk a lot about different avenues, and it's like, how do we become an effective leader? Go to therapy. Like that to summarize this episode,
Yeah.
you want to be a great leader, like that's what you need. We all do, and it's
Yeah.
okay. It's that this world and this life can shape us one way, or we can choose to be shaped the way that we were meant to be here. And to take that journey is to take a journey, I think, deep into yourself and
Yeah. You want to be authentic? Go to
Yeah.
therapy.
Yep.
You want to be genuine? Go to therapy. You want to be compassionate, empathetic to yourself and to others? Go to therapy.
Yeah. Like there's the how. Like, how do we do this? You know, we could talk about all this fancy stuff and leadership theories and this and that, but the how, like, this is it. This is it for sure.
Yep. All right. Everyone have a great start to your week.
As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
And Kerry,
from the Heat of Command podcast.
thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.